I saw in the Stock Journal late last year that PIRSA had been successful in attracting some funding to look at a stock water additive to help with potentially reducing carbon outputs. Are you able to tell us anything about that?
I sure am. Yep. So that project received funding through the Merrill program which is administered by the federal government, so methane emissions reduction
Can
in
you
livestock.
hear down the back there? All right.
Can you move up?
Thank you. So that project was part of the Merrill program, which is methane emissions reduction in livestock, and that is so that program in general will look at development of feed additives, so like what I was talking about before in terms of Asparagopsis or 3-NOP or Agalin or one of those sorts of variants that are fed to livestock to reduce their enteric methane emissions. And that specific project that we were funded for towards the end of last year is looking at the development of delivery systems. So we will be looking at a water delivery technology which is currently available that taps into existing water infrastructure on farm and can deliver. So it exists at the moment to deliver minerals to stock in their in grazing systems. So we're looking at the adaptation of that system for delivery of methane reducing supplements.
Thank you.
So we've got the microphone. Can I quickly ask, is that similar to what you bloat? So when you meter bloat out, would be a similar sort of system? Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, similar. The difference is that it is administered. So they use like a direct injection kind of technology. So it can be turned up or down according to the intake rate of the livestock. So it's quite accurately monitored in terms of what the intake is, which will allow us to get, more accurate representation in terms of how much they are consuming compared to what the effect on their methane production is.
In the middle.
Is it the fatty acids that are influencing the methane output? And if that's the case, is it possible that you can balance the diet to reduce that down further? And obviously, and just have you done work on that so far?
Yep. So there is a couple of ways that these anti-methanogenic feed additives work. The first is by actually attacking methanogens. So methanogens are little bacteria that live in the rumen, and they are the bacteria that catch ammonia and carbon dioxide, which is released as feedstuff is broken down, and smush those molecules together to create methane. So the additives that tend to have the biggest anti-methanogenic effect, like Asparagopsis, for example, works by attacking those methanogens. Some of the other supplements like Agalin, which tend to have a lower anti-methanogenic effect, work by altering the composition of volatile fatty acids in the rumen. So, as you say, if we can manipulate the concentration of some of those acids, then it creates an environment in the rumen that makes it less likely that those methanogens will like to live there. So there'll be less methanogens, so less methane is produced.
So with feeding grain, for instance, it's going to change the fatty acids, proteinic, all that.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right.
It's not a good. That grain's not a good way to reach our target.
Yes. Well, I think it's probably not really viable in the types of situations that we've got now, but higher grain diets produce less methane anyway. So, which is kind of why we need to do a little bit more work around some of these additives, because the work that's been done so far has been in feedlot situations. So we know that that's not necessarily representative of the amount of methane that's produced in non-feedlot type situations. So there is a bit of a double whammy there.
Thank you.
Is native grasses at all beneficial with methane?
livestock?
There are some plants that are better than others. So you probably do know the list of. Oh, there you go.
No, I don't know the list.
There's and I've double checked, cross checked against native plants for home versus those that have methanogenic properties, and there's probably about 12 species. So there's an Aeromophila and some other bits and pieces that have potentially got anti-methanogenic properties. So a lot of work's been done in WA on that, and it's just, I guess the challenge is, because we've looked at, okay, we've got trees, do we go and plant these anti-methanogenic shrubs underneath? But then you've still got to get stock to graze them. And when they've got loose in there and they've got something else under the, an Aeromophila plant, I don't think they're going to go there.
I guess the other side of that is looking at what proportion of proportion of their diet is made up by that plant in those situations. Some of the other work that they're doing in WA is looking at the associated co-benefits of grazing native grasslands for an anti-methane kind of effect, and then what impact that has on ecosystem health.
Homework for me, definitely.
Given the world in a bit of a turmoil with Russia and China, does that mean these requirements for border controls are being delayed, or are banks and the USA and all that still pushing ahead as fast, and yet EU pushing ahead as fast?
It's a really interesting question because everyone thinks it's governments that are doing it. It's not. It's ESG companies. So it's that idle income. So that little box we tick and the trillions of dollars we put into superannuation, we go, that's a really great idea that we're making companies tick, making our companies do that. We feel better. So it's actually not even particularly, like, there are obviously some consumers, but it's not all consumer based. It's coming from government boards. And actually, I remember being at Loxton at a function and turned around, there was 4 politicians standing behind me when we're about to go to agree to net zero 2050, and you've got to stop this, you've got to come out and support us. This is, and I go, what the hell are you talking about? Like the board rooms already shifted. So probably tragically a little bit with Ukraine set up, but also backed by droughts in the US. It's probably delayed a little bit. So certainly food security has taken the limelight, I think, a little bit. 1 billion people going into poverty across the equator is really disturbing, and it's been really hard to actually talk about high prices when 1 billion people are going into poverty, right? So into starvation. So it's been an interesting messaging period, obviously for grains across this last 6 months, 12 months, and going into this year too. So we need food supply just for the human race. So I think that's taken the media effect over a little bit, but no, the big companies are still pushing really hard. And to that point, I think we often get the fact that it doesn't matter anyway, we're selling in Indonesia. But on the other side of Indonesia is Kellogg's, Nestle, Unilever, all sort of lining up on the other side of this interface, which we call Indonesia, the biggest growing market in the world. They've got requirements. They're looking how to do it in Indonesia. They're milling in Indonesia, so that greenwashing won't work by just going, it's a feed market. So, interestingly, grains are only 16% of the agricultural problem. So everything's catching up into. It's gone through livestock, horticulture, now going, now grains, you've also got something to answer. So, I think the government issue has taken the limelight because of food security, but the companies are just going harder and harder. They're really winding up, and we're hearing that loud and clear.
Thanks, Adrian. And I've got to admit, with some of our earlier carbon workshops we had down in our Coorong Tatiara region, we were surprised to see really early on the banks and Rabobank advisors turning up, and we'd be a bit like, oh, hello. Yeah. I had a question for Adrian as well. More a context one. I noted something that you've said is on the diesel job, like getting our grain to port, in South Australia, it's perhaps not as big an impact as we think it is because of the distances. Have you sort of seen any comparative work about how we compare with other countries in that way?
Short answer, no. But you look at Canada, US, the Ukraine. They've got miles and miles and miles of rail. The inability to get there. Even when we look at our emissions in Grenfell in the middle of New South Wales compared to South Australia, it's quite substantial. So it does kick in. Diesel's just not the issue everyone keeps talking about. The dirty diesel, the whole thing. It's just been such a cheap, glib early reaction to it's a bit like carbon really. It's going to be about emissions, and that's where we need to be. We need to know all those levels. We need to know our diesel usage. We need to cap it, minimise it, do what we can, and a lot of that technology is coming in. We're at tier 4 motors now. Might be tied for tier 5. Some electricity stuff's going to be pushed onto us whether we want it or not. But the disruption that would happen to world food supply in the event of pushing agriculture into electricity or hydrogen is enormous, and which is why we need to lead it as industry and give answers too. I mean, we can't sit back and go, oh, that's just rubbish, go away. We've actually got to push back and say, no, that doesn't work for us, but actually this will. We actually can do stuff here, and that's where governments have a role to play in maybe the green hydrogen market or the local nitrogen market. The other benefit of South Australia is our green energy market. We're a green energy state now. Probably 10 years ago, we've probably laughed at it and said, what the hell? It's actually a benefit for South Australian producers now. We can mark ourselves on the back of that because we do have good energy supply. So, yeah, the diesel one's really probably, it's just a diversion, good policy.
But it's also a good story.
Yeah, that's true. We are efficient. We're really efficient. And that's I do farm in New South Wales, and the efficiencies compared to what we do in South Australia, the wall-to-wall farming in South Australia compared to other states, we're outstanding. We're actually really good at it.
I'm going to ask Doctor, in all those results you did on regenerative agriculture, you were suggesting that animals in the system were causing a bit of an issue. So what is the best regenerative agriculture program from all those paddies?
Producing more biomass and a system that lets more carbon going to the soil. So in the
Consistent with where we're going with carbon.
it's maintaining microbial turnover requires providing energy carbon source to microbes, and also making microbes to be diverse and active at times when environment is favorable. The region we studied is, of course, the tough region. Low rainfall, low organic matter, sandy soils. So it's like everything is microbes that have it can grow, survive, and do it. But actually, those microbes, to keep the resources for them to be active and grow, are tough. So that's the reason in this study we found grazing as a negative. It's a negative because in that systems, the way grazing is implemented may not be as optimal to provide that energy source to microbes to maintain the activity potential and resilience.
In lieu of having a system that we are going to know that we're going to be using for accounting for carbon for the bank and for this international markets, is while we're waiting for that, rather than just sitting around waiting for that, is engaging in what we have, like actually the system that exists. Is that worthwhile? Should we be encouraging that more so that at least when these systems come on board, we have some sort of method that we've been using previously to be able to prove whether we've sequestered any carbon or anything like that. That's something that we should be encouraging in the interim.
So the problem in our industry at the moment is, we just see zero-till, save everything, tick all those boxes, but no one cares what I've done in the past once my baseline is basically set. So, but should you be doing best practice? Absolutely, it's good for your soil. The benefits of doing the right thing are there, but no, additionality is it's a real problem. So the people who are going to be able to get the best bang for buck out of ACCUs going forward are probably the worst managers, worst soils, worst managers. I think I put that slide up there. Do everything wrong, grow bugger all, and change your practice. You're going to get more results. But you're not sustainable, let's be fair. You're not going to grow the grain, you're not going to circle. So you're going to, this might be a silver bullet to stay functional, but no, it's a real problem with baseline data, and the biggest frustration that Grains has certainly got is that problem of additionality.
We are encouraging people to use the frameworks that are currently available to develop and understand what their baselines are, so that if and when they decide to take action in this space, they understand they're coming from an informed place. They know where they currently sit, and then can make a decision about where the most appropriate opportunities are for them. And even for people that are engaging in ERF projects, looking at whether they decide to sell those credits or keep them in.
Can't manage what you don't measure.
Yeah.
You can't manage what you don't measure. So, if you can get a baseline on your farm and what your footprint is, if you can do some soil sampling and know where you're starting, not necessarily where you're starting from, but where you're at today. And then in 5 years' time, when someone comes knocking on your door, you can go back and resample that and say, well, hang on, I haven't lost anything. And maybe I've improved a bit, and maybe I've gone backwards a bit, but at least you know.
I guess I was trying to, we don't have a system for doing that baseline in that sampling now, other than the one endorsed by ARF. There's no other universal systems.
No.
Like, what are we going to be able to take to a bank or a market in the future and say, this is my baseline, unless are recognised?
So you can use those methodologies, and you can use them. And I mean, I haven't used those methods. I've used previous older methodologies, which are probably more rigorous, but at least I've got something. So I guess all you can do is go and those methodologies, you don't have to be signed up to view them and to see how that sampling process or measuring process occurs. Use what's there at the moment, because that's the year that you're doing it in. And then when they come back to you, well, that was the methodology at the time. Here's my results. No, I didn't register it as a project, but it's done to rigour. And then it's repeatable. So whatever you do, just make sure that you've got really clear records of how you measure it, and then you've got repeatability. And I think from a banking perspective, and to carry on from what Adrian said, they're not just looking at they're looking at sustainability across the whole business. They're looking at your business sustainability with regards to people. They're looking at your environmental footprint, and then they're looking at profitability, like the triple bottom line. They're looking at all three aspects. And it's just that they hadn't really been looking at that environmental aspect previously. They probably had only just been looking at the people component. They've just been focusing on the profit, but they've now expanded all of their metrics. Yeah, thank you. Metrics to include all three, which I think's amazing. I think it's really good, really smart business. But they're also being forced to do, particularly a lot of the environmental stuff, when they got to borrow money.
Well, they got to report against it.
Yeah.
Now.
Any final or question or comment from the farmers out here who are very quiet? You guys.
Taking it all in.
Taking it all in. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our speakers and panellists.